Hey guys, welcome back to my channel for the ones who have been here before and welcome to the ones who have not. My name is Janae and I'm the owner of Confidently You Creations. So for today's tutorial, I am going to be showing you guys how to double ombre a tumbler and also apply some scrapbook paper. You can also do this with a like a vinyl wrap, but I really loved this design. It kind of reminds me of kind of like a starry night almost. So that's why I put never let go of your dreams on the tumbler, because it just kind of reminds me of like a dreamy starry night almost. So I will be using two types of glitter for this. I will link down in the description box a discount code for the glitters and also a discount code for the decal. The decal was, I got it from Creative Fabrica. You can just sign up for only $1 and you'll have access to thousands and thousands of different fonts and pictures. So I will link in the description box, the discount code for that, okay? So other than that, let's get started and I'll show you guys how I created this design. Alrighty guys, so as always, we start off with a fully sanded and prepped tumbler. This is a 20-ounce stainless steel tumbler from the Stainless Steel Depot. And the scrapbook paper that I'm going to be using, it is from Michael's and it was like 49 cents or something like that. And I have some soap and water to put my brush in. Once I'm done with my ModPodge, I immediately put it in the soap and water. So first we're going to measure our tumbler. I already know the measurements around the tumbler, but I just wanted to kind of show you guys, you know, as far as measurements go. Please forgive my rinky-dink little tape measure. I've had it forever and it was probably passed down for me from like my grandma or something. But anyways, you are going to take that same measurements that you get from around the tumbler and you're going to measure out the exact measurement for the scrapbook paper. Then you're going to mark off the line from where you measured, and then you're going to go ahead and cut your line. All right, now once you do that, you're going to want to do the same thing for the length of it. You don't want all of that excess at the top. So I just lined it up with my tumbler and just made a mark anywhere above it to go ahead and cut that extra paper off of there. All right, and once you have done that, you're going to put that away and you are going to measure it again around the tumbler to make sure it fits. I don't mind the overlapping of my scrapbook paper, but if you do, you know, if that does bother you, then you can pick a design that, you know, looks, you know, incohesive with each other, or you can, you know, try to cut it precise, but it does not bother me, and in the end you really couldn't tell. So now what we're going to do is we are going to put our ModPodge on the tumbler. I put some inside of a little cup here. Now you can do this two ways. You can put the ModPodge on the tumbler like I'm doing now, or you can put it on the scrapbook paper. Whatever works for you. I put it on my tumbler and then wrap the paper around it, but you're more than welcome to put it on the paper and then roll your tumbler on like a table to roll your paper around, or you can still do the same method and pick your paper up and then wrap it around the tumbler. So once I did that, I placed my brush right in that soap and water immediately to where it doesn't cake up on my brush. If it does happen and you forget to put it in the soap and water, acetone works just fine to remove all that gunk off of it. So now you're going to carefully wrap it around your tumbler, keeping the paper flat on the table. If you do have some uneven overlap, it's perfectly fine. We're going to be trimming off the top and the bottom anyways. So don't fret or frat. Is it fret or frat? One of them. About if it's uneven. As you can see there, just a little bit of unevenness at the bottom, but not much. Very, very slight. So you're going to want to go ahead and push all of that down. Make sure it's tight to the tumbler. And then we're going to take some Mod Podge and we're going to seal it on there. So once you have everything wrapped around and tightly and firmly pressed it on your tumbler, you're going to move on to this step immediately. You don't have to wait for the Mod Podge to dry. That's underneath the paper. You just go ahead and start sealing it. All right, and then once that is done, you want to let that layer dry until it is nice and clear, about 30 minutes or so, and then you're going to go in with a second coat to seal it some more. You want to at least apply 3 coats to this, and of course, the more coats that you apply, the longer it's going to take to dry. So just because your first coat took, 15 minutes or 30 minutes to dry, does not mean your second coat is going to be the same way too. The more coats you apply, the longer it's going to take to, the more coats you apply, the more, the longer it's going to take for it to dry. So then you're going to let this sit maybe for about 2 hours, and then you're going to go in and trim the rims, the top and the bottom. So if you've seen my past videos, I will take a piece of painter's tape, especially when I'm doing vinyl or scrapbook paper. I will take a piece of painter's tape and I will wrap it around the tumbler to make sure I have an even cut, making sure that the painter's tape does not overlap each other. And then I will trim around that painter's tape. I did not let my tumbler dry long enough, so that's why I let it dry, learn from my mistake. But it really didn't matter in the end because we're going to be glittering this bottom. But it was not dry enough and the paper just tore. So wet paper, obviously, is not going to have a nice crisp cut. It was basically tearing apart. So, but I just kind of kept it going and I kept the tape on there. And I just went ahead and continued to trim around it until I was finished. So just let your tumbler dry, guys. I'm impatient. I don't understand how I'm a tumbler artist because I have like 0 patience. But everything always works out in the end. So after I was done trimming that, I took my painter's tape off, and then you can see it looks a mess right now, guys. Trust the process. I promise everything is going to be perfect in the end. Okay, so we're going to trim off the top as well. The top was plenty dry. I did not have any issues at the top at all. I placed the painter's tape around it and did the exact same thing. You place the painter's tape around it, make sure you don't have any overlapping of your painter's tape, and that's how you know that it is straight. And I trimmed the top of the rim with my craft knife. Same thing as the bottom, and it worked out fine. So that's why I said make sure it's dry before you move on to this step. Alrighty, so I'm going to do something a little bit extra to my tumbler. I'm going to apply some gold flakes. The tumbler has like these yellow, speckles or spots on it. So I just kind of wanted to make it stand out a little bit more. And added some gold flakes to it, and then it just kind of added a little bit more texture to it. So that's why I added my gold flakes. You do not have to do this part. You can completely skip it if you're not adding anything extra to the tumbler. But again, this just kind of defined it a little bit more and brought out those yellow gold pieces that was in the scrapbook paper. So I'm going to actually apply Tack it this time instead of ModPodge, because ModPodge, again, it dries a little bit too quickly, and then Tack it dries tacky. So I still have a little bit more time after it dries to apply my gold flakes. So, and it also acts as a sealer, just like the ModPodge did for the previous 2 layers. So 3 layers is good as far as sealing it. So make sure you get in those nooks and crannies of where you trimmed, making sure you go horizontally and vertically, sealing off the areas of where you trimmed. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply my gold flakes. I did have a little bit of not bubbles, but the foliage areas. Sometimes you have a way with words when you're recording these videos, okay? But you can see some creases. There we go. I had some creases in a couple of areas, and so I just kind of masked it with the gold flakes. Again, trusting the process. Sometimes things may not look beautiful during the process, but afterwards it's like, man, oh my goodness. So this tumbler had a nice shine to it. The glitter that I'm using was a 2-tone type of glitter, and it just turned out so pretty. So you want to make sure to lay your gold flakes nice and flat, because the next step will be applying your epoxy. So just go back and kind of tap down any of the larger clumped areas, and we are good to go for our next step. Alrighty, so this has dried overnight. I left it alone and I just let it dry and do its thing to make sure it was completely dry before going to this next part. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a thin coat of epoxy. So if you're not applying your gold flakes after that 3rd layer of ModPodge or Tack it or whatever you're using for your sealer, once that dries, you can go straight into your epoxy, and then you can go ahead and put the glitter on of your choice. So that's what we're doing now. We're applying a very thin coat of epoxy, just like you normally would when you're applying glitter using the epoxy method. You don't want anything too heavy, so your glitter won't soak into the epoxy, leaving uneven patches on your tumbler. Alrighty, so once that is done and you've got your epoxy covered evenly, I'm going to use Saltwater Kisses from Glitterful. It is a color shifting glitter. It went perfectly with this scrapbook paper. It has that green, bluish, saltwatery look to it. And so I just knew this glitter would be perfect for it. So I'm going to go ahead and apply some glitter to the bottom of the cup first. So I always, when I'm ombreing, I go ahead and put a nice, about an inch, as you can see, coverage of glitter right there at the bottom. And then we'll move on to our ombreing. So put enough to cover, if your paper rips a lot, just put enough to cover the boo-boos. Cover those up. And then this color shifting is a fine glitter, but it's not ultra fine. So it had like a full coverage, like you could not see any silver underneath this glitter. It is amazing. So anyways, so now we're going to go ahead and put our top back on and go ahead in with our ombre. So what we're going to do is we're going to tilt our cup up. You haven't seen me do this before, but you may have seen it done before. So when you're tapping, you're going to tap and aim for the rim of the cup and then just let it fall. You may not be able to tell, but my arm is tilting the tumbler, and then you're going to slowly shake it. I did speed up the video a little bit to kind of buy us some time, but I am shaking it very slowly to make sure I'm hitting the edge of that rim where we already placed the inch of glitter around the rim, and just kind of letting it fall and cascade down. And then now we're going to do the same exact thing for the top. We're going to go ahead and place about an inch of glitter around the top and then ombre it downward. Alrighty, so once you have full coverage on the top rim, you're going to go ahead and open up your sprinkle part and you're going to tap, 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 angling the tumbler downwards and letting the glitter cascade downwards. And again, you're aiming for the very top rim where you've already placed that inch of glitter, and just letting it again, cascade down the tumbler. You can also, use your hands and just pick up some glitter and sprinkle it down if you feel like it's coming out of the shaker a little bit too fast. You can also use like a glitter sifter. You can use one of those also. Whatever works for you to kind of get your ombre perfect, but it does take a little practice. Again, just slowly tap and cascade it down the tumbler. So once that's all said and done, I'm actually going to go in with a second color, which is Rustic from Glitterful as well. And I just wanted to add a little bit of the gold in there to complement the gold flakes that are in the tumbler and give it a nice shimmer. So same thing, I am tilting my cup upwards a little bit, and I am just sprinkling some of the gold around. No rhyme or reason. I'm not trying to overpower it with the gold. I just wanted to, again, just complement it a little bit. All right, you're just going to shake off any excess glitter that you have just kind of hanging around. And now you don't have to do this part if you don't want to, but I just went in and just kind of got those little straggly pieces of glitter that just didn't look right in certain places. So I just took my gloved hand and just either rub them down or rub them off to just make room in the middle for my decal. After you've let that coat dry for about 8 hours, you're going to go in and you're going to remove a lot of that excess glitter because I did not seal this. So I removed the excessive amount of glitter. So when I went in to epoxy this cup, it would not shift and move around. All right, so we've went in and we placed 2 coats of epoxy as always, letting our first coat dry for about 6 hours and then moving in with our second coat of epoxy, and then letting the second coat dry for 12 hours before moving on to our sanding. So first, you want to make sure you get your rim. You've got ModPodge on it. You've gotten Tack on it, you've gotten glitter on it, you've got epoxy. Everything is just kind of caked up on the top. So take your craft knife and trim around that rim first. Save you some time from sanding the rim. Remove all of that excess stuff first, and then you can move on to your sanding. As always, you've seen me do this before in previous videos about sanding your rim. You always want to make sure, well, at least I always sand every cup. Doesn't matter if it's glittered or not glittered. I'm always going to sand my rim to make sure I expose a very thin line of stainless steel to have a nice seal for the final coats of epoxy. I, especially on glitter cups, will sand the bottom to make sure it is nice and smooth. There is no lumps or sharp ends, because it sucks getting to the end and your tumbler is not smooth. I like to sand one time and that's it. So make sure your tumbler is nice and smooth. So once that is done, you've washed it off and you have applied some rubbing alcohol to it to clean it off. We're going to move into our decal. And again, like I said in the beginning, I've got my decal from Creative Fabrica. The first month is only $1, and then thereafter it's $19 a month for like an unlimited amount of images. So I left some of the vinyl on because it's easier to take it off on the tumbler. So you guys will see that later on in the video what I mean. But I'm just going to hit it with my heat gun to make sure this comes off nice and smooth. Find your area of where you want it. That's why I kind of cleared off some glitter in the middle to make sure I had clear visibility of my decal in the middle. And as always, you've seen me do this before. Measure, measure, measure. You want to make sure you're happy with where your decal is, because there's nothing worse than putting it on and then you're like, oh my God, it's crooked. So I measured the beginning of the decal, the middle, and the end on the line of where I placed like the top of the decal. Making sure it is perfectly straight, and then I go ahead and do the hinge method to put the decal on. I trim one side and then I go in and I trim the other side to make sure that it does not move from where I placed it. All right, so once that is on, I'm going to take my weeding tool and I'm going to weed out those little pieces in between the letters that I couldn't get when it was on the paper backing, because the letters would just keep slipping. So it's a lot easier to do that once it's on your tumbler, especially for those tiny little words or spaces that you just can't get on the paper. So this is what I mean when I said I was going to weed it on the tumbler. So once you are finished with this part, weeding your small little pieces in between the letters, you're going to place your final coats of epoxy, whether it's 2 or it's 3. You are pretty much done. Want to place your decal. It's gorgeous. So I will show you guys the end result. Alrighty, so here it is, our ending result of our tumbler. We have double ombrated, we applied a scrapbook paper, and we did some gold flakes. So we did a lot, guys. So thank you guys so much. Please like this video and give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. We upload every Friday. See you next week.